I ask that you take out your outlines. We're continuing in our series Building Better Relationships. We're mainly looking at 1 Corinthians, the 13th chapter. In verse 4, it says, love does not envy. Love does not envy. What is envy? Envy is different from jealousy. Jealousy says, I want what you have. Envy says, not only do I want what you have, but I don't want you to have it. I want you to lose it. Not only do I want my grass to be greener than yours, I want yours to turn brown. And folks, the Bible points out that envy, as well as life experiences, that envy can show up in any kind of relationship. Family, of course. The Bible is filled with examples. Cain and Abel, Jacob and Esau, Rachel and Leah, Joseph and his brothers. There's certainly envy in families. How about work? Professional jealousy, of course. Many times salesmen envy other salesmen, and doctors other doctors, and pastors other pastors. How about school? Every day, kids are comparing boyfriends and clothes and cars and grades and on and on. Can it happen among friends? Of course. I heard about one lady, she put it this way. She said, I'm allergic to fur. She said, every time I see my good friend wearing it, I get sick. Folks, we live actually in a very competitive world. In ways we're all touched by envy. The advertising business is basically created on envy. Not only do you need this, but if you've got our product, you will be the envy of everybody else. I want us to briefly this morning look at the result of envy, how it ruins families and relationships, but most on how to reduce envy in our lives. The Bible says that there are three things envy does in relationships. First of all, it causes conflict. The Bible says in the book of James, what causes conflict, fights and quarrels among you? Don't they come from your desire that battles within you? James says conflict comes from the desires within us. Do you ever remember playing King of the Hill as a young person? You know there's only room for one at the top. Adults still play that game. Only we are a little more subtle with it. It's look at the car I'm driving. Look at the color of my credit card. My kids are smarter than your kids. Conflict can even happen in marriages. I wonder how many times one spouse or the other has says you pay more attention to your job than you do to me. Envy can cause conflict, but it also can kindle resentment. The Bible says our lives were full of resentment and envy. We hated each other and they hated us. Envy is the shortest road to resentment. It always causes bitterness. We resent others because they're more successful than we are. We resent other people because they have more wealth. Or maybe they've had more achievements. Or even better looking. Actually, we can even envy other people's spirituality. I can remember hearing a lady one time wondering why her husband can be more spiritual like another one. She felt it was not fair. Folks, that's envy. The book of James says, for where you find envy, you find every evil practice. See, envy actually causes other sins. It can lead to gossip. It can lead to stealing. It can lead to adultery and murder. Joseph's brothers envied him and they sold him into slavery. Saul envied David and tried to kill him. The FBI tell us that over 1/3 of all murders occur because of suspicion of infidelity. And number 3, envy makes us miserable. If you've ever been envious of someone, you know that from experience. The Bible says a heart at peace gives life to the body, but envy rots the bones. You know, envy to our soul is what cancer is to the body. It can eat you alive. It can destroy you if you don't watch out for it. It will actually torment you and eventually consume you. You cannot be happy and envious at the same time. So one of the greatest secrets of happiness in your life is learning how to eliminate envy in your life. Okay, how do we do it? How do we eliminate this green demon that pops up every now and then? It's not in your outline, but let me give you 2 ways not to do it. Number 1, don't try to change your circumstances. You're envious of this person, they got more money than I have, so I'm going to get out and work and I'm going to make more money. Have you ever noticed the problem though, when you get up to that level, there's always another level? And the second one is don't try to change your feelings. You know, I'm going to force myself not to be envious. I am simply not going to feel that way. Folks, we talk about it a lot. You cannot force a feeling. It doesn't work. God says the way you change envy is you change the way you think. You change your perspective, the way you look at the situation. In fact, the Bible gives us 5 ways to help us overcome envy in any relationship. The first one is to resist comparing myself to others. Resist comparing myself to others. Folks, envy always starts by comparing yourself. If you don't do that, you're not going to be envious. The Bible tells us we do not compare ourselves. It is not wise. God says don't compare yourself. It is not wise. The Bible tells us in Galatians 6, let everyone be sure to do his very best, for then he will have the personal satisfaction of work well done and won't need to compare himself with someone else. The Bible reminds us, don't compare yourself with other people. Folks, if you do your best, that's where satisfaction comes from. You never measure your worth by somebody else. Also, I want to remind you that envy is a choice. Anytime you are envious, you are choosing to be envious. Now, it may make you miserable, but it's still a choice. You choose to compare, and God says, don't do it. That's not smart. So when I find myself getting to be envious, I need to stop and ask myself some questions. What am I telling myself at this moment? What am I telling myself about this situation that really isn't true? For example, that my work is based on how I compare to somebody else. It doesn't. Don't compare. The second thing, and overcoming envious, is I need to recognize my uniqueness. Folks, envy is an expression of inferiority. When I am insecure, I get envious. It's always caused by low self-esteem. When I have low self-esteem, I feel threatened. I feel threatened because somebody is better looking than I am. They're better dressed. They have more status or more education or more charisma. God said, don't do it. Recognize your own uniqueness. So how do I deal with that insecurity? Folks, the Bible says we need to see ourselves as God sees us. You, God, created every part of me. You put me together in my mother's womb. God said, I put you together in the womb. In other words, you've got designer genes. There's nobody else in the world like you. So why try to compare yourself to somebody else? There will never be anybody to compare yourself with because you're different. You're unique. When you get to heaven, God is not going to ask you, why weren't you more like David or Moses or Peter or Paul? Or why weren't you more like Billy Graham? God is going to say, why were you not more like you? Why were you not more the way I created you to be? Folks, that's where satisfaction comes from. That's where meaning and purpose and fulfillment comes from, when we discover what God created us to be. When you were born, for I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans to prosper you and not harm you. Plans to give you hope and a future. Now, folks, this does not mean that everything that happens in your life is going to be good, or that it's God's will. In fact, Jesus taught us to pray in the Lord's Prayer, Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Folks, we wouldn't have to pray that prayer if God's will was always done. In fact, it does not say that everything in your life is good. But the Bible does teach God can take everything, the good, the bad, and the ugly, and He can actually bring good out of it. Romans 8:28 says all things work together for good. It doesn't say that all things are good, but that all things work together for good. God has a plan. And folks, if God has a plan, and you are unique, that means that every one of us is a 10 in some areas. On a scale of 1 to 10, you are a 10 in some areas. Because of your particular makeup, your genes, your background, your temperament, your education, your experiences, God puts all that together, and He has uniquely formed you, and you are a 10 in some areas. Now, not at all. In fact, most of us are not at all. But there are certain areas that you're good at. God designed you to be good at that. Not just for your career, but to be used in serving others. We've talked before about the fact that every Christian is a minister. You're not a pastor, but you're a minister. God has given you talents to use in ministry, in service of others. We all need to recognize that God has made us a 10 in some areas, that we're unique. Number 3, if I'm going to deal with envy, I need to learn to rejoice in what I have. I need to learn to rejoice in what I have. See, in order to overcome envy, I need to rejoice in what I have. The Bible says it is better to be satisfied with what you have than always wanting to something else. See, instead of focusing on what I do not have, I need to be focusing on how bountifully God has already blessed me. So often we think, well, I've got this, but if I can get a little bit more, I will be happier. That's not true. Folks, you really cannot purchase happiness. Now, you can purchase thrills, but thrills don't last. You cannot purchase happiness. I think one of the amazing things about envy is that when we start envying other people, we have this way of projecting our problems on them as if it was their fault. See, the reason I am miserable is because you're so good looking. The reason that I am so miserable is because you got more money than I've got. The reason I am so miserable is because you're more successful than I am. Folks, that should have absolutely nothing to do with our happiness. That's something you're allowing to happen. In fact, the Bible reminds us, I have learned to be content whatever the circumstances. Now, I realize that it's not easy to be contented. In fact, we're taught not to be contented. It's something that you have to learn. You know, one of the things that I am learning is I've already got a whole lot more than I deserve. And probably most of us here do. We need to learn to rejoice in what I have. And then number 4, if I want to deal with envy, I need to start responding to others in love. Why? Because the Bible says love does not envy. Jesus said, love your neighbor as yourself. Why does he say love is the antidote to envy? Because love is happy when other people are blessed. Love wants the highest good for other people. Love actually gets excited when other people succeed. Love enjoys seeing other people blessed. See, it's the exact opposite of envy. The Bible says, rejoice with those who rejoice, and weep with those who weep. This verse is the exact opposite of envy. See, envy rejoices when other people have a bad time, and weeps when other people are blessed. God says that's not the way you should do. You should rejoice with those who rejoice, and weep with those that weep. Folks, that's love. That's how you build a good relationship. Do you ever have a hard time handling the success of other people? We probably all have at one time or other. You know, why didn't I get that promotion instead of them? But you know, when you back off and look at it, envy is resenting God's goodness to other people. If I resent because somebody has succeeded, I'm saying, God, I resent the fact that they're succeeding. It's sort of like, if they succeed, that means that I won't. Folks, God has got enough goodness for everybody. Just because you succeed, it does not mean that I'm not going to, that God is not going to be good to me. God has enough goodness for all of us. We need to work at responding to others in love. And then number 5, you need to refocus on pleasing God. Refocus on pleasing God. And that is probably the ultimate antidote to overcoming envy. The Bible says, set your mind on things above and not on earthly things. Begin to look at life from God's viewpoint. Recognize that all of the material things we have are great. They're all temporary. They're not going to last. We need to refocus on things that really matter. Things that are not only going to matter here, but in eternity. Like loving God, and knowing and serving God, and loving our neighbor as ourselves. When I focus on making God number one in my life, when I focus on realizing that He has made me unique, that He has a plan for my life, and then competition sort of moves aside. Because I'm not competing with anybody else. God made me in a very special way. So the antidote is to be found, I think, on focusing on God's plan for your life. And then you can't be bothered with envying what somebody else is doing. You're focusing on pleasing God. The Bible says, don't be envious of sinful people. Let reverence for the Lord be the concern for your life. If it is, you have a bright future. If it is, you have a bright future. Why would we take an entire Sunday morning to deal with the subject of envy? Because the Bible says love does not envy. Love does not envy. What do you do, or what do you envy in life? It's a cancer that will consume your soul, and it will destroy all of your relationships. And just like cancer, it needs to be cut out. Maybe we need to ask God to do some spiritual surgery on us today. Maybe we need to ask God to help us to take these 5 steps. Lord, would you help me to resist comparing myself to other people? To realize that envy is a choice, and it is never and to never measure my worth by other people. Lord, help me to recognize my uniqueness. That you made me and you have a special plan and purpose for my life. Help me to rejoice in what I have instead of focusing on what I don't have. Help me to realize that some of what I'm making is not meant to just be spent on me, but to be used for your kingdom and for the growth of others. Help me to respond to others in love and be happy when other people are blessed, and not resentful or envious, but rejoice with those who rejoice. And most of all, Father, help me to focus on pleasing you and to looking at life from your viewpoint. To realize that the most important thing that I can do is have a personal relationship with you and love my neighbor as myself. Shall we stand and sing our